Now to introduce our presenter for tonight's lecture. Joan Strassmann has been a slow birder all her life, mostly in the USA, but she has also lived in Mexico, London, Geneva, Venezuela, Florence, and Berlin. Joan is an award-winning teacher of animal behavior, first at Rice University and then at Washington University in St. Louis, where she is the Charles Rebstock Professor of Biology. She has written more than 250 scientific articles on the behavior, ecology, and evolution of social organisms. She is a member of the National Academy of Sciences and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a fellow of the Animal Behavior Society and the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and has held a Guggenheim Fellowship. We can't wait to hear from Joan tonight, so at this point, I will turn things over to her to get us started. Hi, Joan.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me. This is going to be really fun.
Agreed.
So I guess I'll get going with share screen.
Yep, perfect. It looks great.
Perfect, yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your summer evening with you. I'm sure you have a whole lot of other things you might be doing, and so it's just great that you're here with me. I'm speaking to you from Leland, Michigan, where we escape the St. Louis heat and get some beach time and some time with the birds. So you might wonder why on earth a person that works on wasps and now mostly on social amoebas ever thought to write a book called Slow Birding. And I'll tell you, it was really actually kind of hard to write this book. And I spent so many years thinking about it, I almost didn't do it at all. I first thought about it from when I first heard about the slow food movement, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. It was started in Italy by Carlo Petrini, who was a journalist, and some others. And one of their first big demonstrations was in response to seeing that they put a McDonald's in Rome in 1986, right by the Spanish Steps. And they were just outraged. They just felt like, don't we have good enough food? And so the way that they protested was by bringing huge trays of penne pasta with a simple tomato sauce. And instead of violence or signs or anything, they fed the people standing to go into McDonald's, trying to remind them of how great the food was that they had right there at home. And I guess in honor of that, I fed my family tonight one of those simple pastas with the local fresh tomato sauce. Well, so what does that have to do with slow birding? It's really the same concept. It's just that instead of driving all over the place looking for the newest bird, adding to your county list or your state list or your world list, just enjoy the birds that you have right at home. And you can do this by simply watching them a little more carefully. Not that I don't like traveling and seeing birds, because of course I do also like that, but I just love to understand them. And so, let's see, is that going to work? I'm a teacher. I teach at WashU in St. Louis and previously at Rice. And as a teacher, I really wanted to get my students to learn what science was about through their own experience. And so Slow Birding as a book really came out of my teaching as much as it came out of my research. So I suck at synchronizing my slides. There's the slow birds. So there's nothing like a robin to see something that you can watch carefully. I like to think that I teach in kind of a different way. And what I did with these undergraduates is instead of having a programmed lab where we started here and we ended up there, and if everything went right, they would connect the dots to the end. I decided I'd teach a really open-ended course. And I started by introducing the students to some birds on campus and asking them simply, how do these birds use time and space? I mean, that's sort of the most fundamental question a behaviorist could ask. And the three birds nesting on campus were the great-tailed grackles, northern mockingbirds, and yellow-crowned night herons. So the undergrads were simply asked to watch them and to say how behavior differed among the sexes. Now, that was a little bit of a trick question because the yellow-crowned night herons and the mockingbirds, the sexes look the same. So then that gave me a chance to expose some of their biases. So with the yellow-crowned night herons, they decided the ones that brought back sticks were the males. And I just said, well, how could you say that? What is your evidence that bringing back sticks is a male behavior? So I tried to shake them up a little bit. And the only behavior I'd let them have for sex identification was copulation, where I agreed the male was on top. And so they used that to figure out that, in fact, they were right. The males were the ones bringing back more sticks. So the class was really fun. It was fun to teach. It was fun to watch the growth in the students. And after they had done this first exercise, I simply asked them, what else would you like to know? Figure something else out. These birds weren't banded. They were just out there in nature. So that added a little bit of a challenge to them. And they ended the class with having to have done one experiment they thought of where they could count something and use a statistical test, which they felt that it was a great course. And this past, just a couple of weeks ago, I was at the animal behavior meetings in London, Ontario, and I had the privilege of seeing the presidential baton passed from one of my former undergrads to another of my former undergrads, both of whom had taken this course and decided that they would make animal behavior their life's work. All right, this might sound like a big, huge digression. What does it have to do with slow birding? Well, what it has to do with slow birding is I just felt like this approach of watching the birds was meaningful, and I wanted to share it with more people. I mean, everyone couldn't come to Rice and take my course. So I just thought, what if I sort of take my teaching, take the slow birding, I couldn't call it stupid birding or really slow birding or, lazy birding. I just thought, well, what if we simply help people understand how to watch the birds, and that it's a really different approach from the people that have a big year or run all over and see all the birds. And, I love to read those books, but there was one I read recently, and I won't say which one, which I got to the end of the book and I realized I had heard about some amazing adventures with landslides and, hiking in the dark and all that kind of thing. But I hadn't actually read a single story about what the birds do. And birds are really pretty amazing. They do some pretty incredible things. This picture here is a great egret. This is a parent. These are the young. The young tend to kick out the smallest of the chicks. And yeah, it's kind of a shocking behavior, but there's just lots of things that go on. So, I struggled with how I was going to do this. And I finally decided, well, if it's slow birding, it should really be local birding. And I should just focus on birds that were close to my St. Louis home. So I made a 20-mile circle and picked 5 places and just 16 birds to talk about in some detail. And now one good thing about these 16 birds is I was really careful to pick the very commonest birds I could. So, starlings are in there, house sparrows are in there, red-bellied woodpeckers, blue jays, just the commonest birds, because they have such amazing stories that the ornithologists have figured out. So I'll tell you a few stories about the birds. Here's one. Here's a blue jay. I really love blue jays. When my kids were little, we moved from one house to another in Houston. And as I was getting one out of their car seat, I saw that a blue jay had flown into the car to the console, picked up a quarter, and flown off. And I thought, oh, this is something new. This was not advertised as a feature of this neighborhood. And as it went on, we discovered that this bird came regularly, would sit in our hand, would sit on the garden fork, would just simply seem to have been a formerly tame fledgling that now liked coins, and they always flew south with them. So I think there's probably a big stash of them somewhere. Now, I really love blue jays, but it seems that other people don't. I feel bad about that. You know why I say that? The blue jay is not the state bird of any state. I mean, it's a highly Googled bird, but it's not the state bird. And northern cardinals, western meadowlarks, northern mockingbirds each have 6 states. How creative is that? So I just think blue jays kind of need our appreciation. And maybe you can, next time you're outside, think good thoughts about blue jays. Maybe you could try to figure out all the sounds they make. They will imitate hawks, for example. Maybe you could follow a bird for a certain amount of time. Maybe at this time of year, we have the young of the year. They look almost like the adults, but they have slight bit more fluff on their chest. And even though they're adult size, they might still be begging for food from their parents. So there's a lot more in the book about blue jays. I get asked about them the most because it's the first chapter. So most people that talk to me have read the first chapter, so they ask me about blue jays. But I'll tell you some more about this bird. American robins are more appreciated. They are state birds, and they're the one you often think of. When I was testing out the wonderful app Merlin, and I asked my husband to think of a bird and then went through Merlin's questions, he was thinking of a American robin. I also like their kind of shrieking call. It reminds me of my mother when she was sure that we had mortally wounded ourselves doing something or another outside. So they also have some great calls. Robins have active, what we might call dating lives. They pair up, and the male and the female both diligently rear the young, bringing back worms for the babies. I'm sure you've seen them in the grass doing that. But it turns out that about half of the young are not sired by the male that's taking care of them. It's kind of surprising. So to figure this out, Patrick Weatherhead at University of Illinois and his grad student Karen Rowe use DNA markers, just like those that we use to look at paternity and ancestry and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty crazy. And when I read that paper, one of the things I like to do is read the acknowledgments, because you can often find out some cool details as to what went on there. And I saw that there was a mention of a woman named Sarah Coker, who is a professor at Princeton now, in the acknowledgments. And so I said, hey, I see you're acknowledged in a robin paper. You now work on bees. What's that all about? She emailed me back and said, American robins. Yes, this was my first foray into behavioral ecology. I took a class with Pat Weatherhead, and I realized how much I adored animal behavior. I signed up for a summer project, and it changed my life. And she goes on to say that after the first cup of coffee from a 4 a.m. get up, that she felt pretty good about the research, and then even met her husband in the field doing that work. So her robin work as an undergrad was pretty important to her. There's another crazy story. I thought it was crazy when I first heard about it anyway. This is from Bob Montgomery and a student, Felina English. So Bob is a good friend of mine. He read all the chapters for me in Slow Birding, and he was just the right level of critical without being discouraging. He's really a great guy. He's a retired professor from Queen's University in Canada. And he's a skeptic. And he read somewhere that males cared more for chicks that hatched out of bluer eggs. So why might that be? Well, birds have never heard of the prodigal son. They tend to care more for the young most likely to survive. So many of them don't survive that this is an important strategy. So why might a chick hatching from a bluer egg be in better shape? Turns out the blue comes from bilirubin, which is an antioxidant that the females have in their bodies, and that if the eggs are bluer, they have had extra bilirubin to color the eggs. So the experiment, so Bob thought, yeah, right, this makes no sense. But he didn't just dismiss it out of hand. He also decided to study it. And so what he did a really fabulous experiment, so well controlled, is he found a whole bunch of robins' nests, synchronized, because it's Canada, so they're doing pretty well, so they nest synchronously. One thing about not teaching all the time with the pandemic is my voice doesn't last as long. Anyway, so what Bob did was he found all these robins' nests. He made plaster of Paris robins' eggs, some of them dark blue and some light blue. He then carefully removed the 4 or so eggs from each robin's nest and replaced them with either light blue or dark blue plaster eggs, which fooled the robins. They incubated them and everything. The removed eggs he took carefully and put them in an incubator. And then a day or so before they were due to hatch, he went back and replaced them. And he didn't put the same eggs in the same nest. He mixed them all up. And so it was really a well-controlled study where the birds that incubated plaster light blue eggs, were those males going to care more for the young that had less, where the light blue care less for the eggs, for the chicks, than the dark blue. And what he expected was to show that there was no difference and that this whole bilirubin thing was just not valid. But that's not what he found. what he found was that it was valid, and that the males that had darker blue plaster eggs for most of their, pre-hatch experience actually fed the young double the amount for the first 3 days of the chicks' lives, which is the really essential time. So, in a way, it's a really perfect study because it's so carefully controlled. And it was also done by someone who wanted it to not be true. So I really love that study. So, yeah, next time you're out there and you see a robin pulling up a worm or something like that, just remember, if it's a male, he's probably taking care of babies that he did not sire, and that he'll care more for darker blue than lighter blue eggs. Another cool thing about robins is they're not fooled by cowbirds. Cowbird lays an egg in a robin's nest and they'll just kick that right out. So that's kind of cool. So, you know what this one is? This is a coot. This is a American coot, and it's in the chicken family, or more closely the chicken order, the rail family. It doesn't have webbed feet. It has big flanges on its toes that let it swim. They're fairly common on water bodies. I'm not sure how much of the year you have them around. Up here in northern Michigan, we only have them sporadically. Anyway, the thing that's astonishing about them is that these babies have these bright vermilion orange heads. And that's just so weird because babies are supposed to be camouflaged and hide themselves. And in fact, these young do hide themselves. If a alarm call is given or something, they bury their heads deep in their nests, so they know that their bright heads are not a good thing for predators. So Bruce Lyon studied these up in British Columbia for his Ph.D., and he thought maybe the bright heads had to do with parental care, and that maybe the young were signaling to their parents, care for me, I'm really healthy, I have this big bright head. And this turned out more or less to be the case. But then Bruce noticed something really strange. And actually, it was his grad student. By then, he was a professor at University of California at Santa Cruz. And his grad student, Dai Shizuka, who's now on the faculty at Nebraska, found a really astonishing situation. And that was that the coots were killing or pushing away their own young. And they just couldn't figure that out. And then they finally figured out the whole story, which was that there's egg dumping in coots. This means females that aren't successful early on tend to just go lay eggs in other females' nests. These nests are in the reeds along the water, and that's what they would do. So you could end up with a nest with a whole lot of babies. And it's not in the parents' interest to raise all these extra babies. So it turns out that the dumped eggs come after their first own eggs. And so the parents sort of learn the colors and the patterns of their own chicks by imprinting on the first to hatch. So that's, how these stories get all tangled. Most birds, just a little digression, most birds don't incubate the eggs until they've all been laid. No bird lays more than one egg a day. And they want the time that birds are in the nest and being fed to be as short as possible, because feeding them attracts predators. So they usually just leave the eggs. They lay them and leave them until they've all been laid, then incubate them. They hatch simultaneously, and that minimizes the time in the nest. So coots start incubating after they've laid a few eggs. So that means the first laid eggs will hatch first. They learn those chicks. They care for a group of 3 or 4 of the first ones, both parents together. And then for the later chicks, the parents kind of pick 1 or 2 and care intensively for them. And they each pick different ones, still caring for the much more independent older chicks. And the way they pick their own chicks and not their chicks laid by someone else is by learning these color patterns. So that was kind of a amazing story for Bruce to figure out, and he did it with observation and then also experiments, trimming cut feathers and that sort of thing. And I don't know if you can see right on the back of the net, there's a couple of beads that are temporarily attached to the young, and they lose them as they grow. Well, by now you may be looking at your watches and wondering if I'm going to actually talk through all 16 birds, and really you could just read the book, right? So no, I won't talk through all 16 birds. I'll tell you a little bit more about the backstory. Anthony Bartley was the artist for slow birding. He's a great guy. His own love of art is doing these sort of really dramatic kind of cartoon mural like illustrations. So when I was going to get an artist, I knew I wanted it to be an opportunity for someone, not just pick whoever everybody else used. And so I had that as my goal. I wanted someone local, someone for whom it would be an opportunity. Now, I knew Anthony because he worked in my lab as an undergrad. He was a biology and art double major. And knowing his art, I just never would have just said, hey, want to draw some birds. It just seemed like it would almost be rude. But then he asked me for a letter of recommendation for a job, illustrator job in the OB-GYN department at WashU. And I thought, oh, if you're going to do all kinds of medical drawings, maybe you'd be willing to draw some birds. And of course he was. So I'm really pleased with his art. And here's his website. He has things there for sale. He's currently in Chicago. Couple of things. I'm guessing all of you know about the magic of Merlin, listening to, and usually gets it right. You want to say for sure what you heard is what Merlin says, but it's a great way to learn the bird songs and to sort of enrich your life about what's around you. And then eBird. I don't know how good any of you are, but if you're decent enough to know a few birds and log them well, I'm really a believer in sort of the world's log for birds. I try to do an eBird list every day, and I don't use it to log rare birds usually. I often talk about I often see very common birds I see over and over again, but I figure the scientists that study birds are using eBird data, and just the pattern of what birds are in what places is really useful. And then I never had a life list till eBird. I never cared to do that. But eBird kind of does it automatically, and it'll also let you keep track of where you've been. So Merlin and eBird, 2 free apps from Cornell. Many of you probably already know about them, but I think they're great. So how are we doing on time? No answer.
You have plenty of time, Joan.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's see. Oh, another thing sometimes people like to know is, oh, how did you write a book? I want to write a book. How did you do it? Did you just say 6 a.m. to 10 writing only? And I didn't do that because I'm a professor and I have a lab full of students, and I just felt like they got my first attention. And so what I found was that if you're really curious about something and you really want to do it, that little scraps of time here and there manage to add up to a book after about 18 months. So if you despair at finding set aside time, maybe it's not so hard. For me, it was the beginning of the pandemic, so that also gave me extra time. Okay, I'll tell you about a couple more birds. Snow geese. These birds fly over you in the spring and in the fall, and maybe you sometimes see them. They fly over St. Louis by the thousand. It's really kind of exciting. So I like to think of snow geese as being like us, or even like what we would aspire to. And that is that they are monogamous. There's none of that fooling around that the robins do in snow geese. They feed together, they summer together, they winter together, they mate for life, and rear their young in pairs. But they're like us in some other ways, and that is that there's too many of them. Not saying there's too many of us, but there's too many snow geese, and they cause severe habitat degradation in the highest Arctic, where many other birds also nest. And I figured this out in a really kind of weird way. So I was on Facebook, and one of my friends, a ornithologist, he posted that he was making stir fry out of snow goose breast, and then he was making sausage and all this. And it was springtime, and I was like, what? You are shooting snow geese in the springtime? And then it turned out that the only restriction on hunting snow geese is you can't use lead shot, which, obviously lead shot is terrible for the environment. But there are so too many snow geese that you can actually hunt them all year round, and they're extremely wary of hunters. Even those fake geese that they put in the ponds, the wooden ones, seldom work. So they're geese, they degrade their habitat. They do this to such an extent that places where they nest only last a few decades. So Fred Cook studied them in a place near Churchill, which is famous as being a place where you go to see polar bears, near La Perouse Bay. And now they're not there anymore. They've moved some 50 miles away because the habitat's just been trampled and destroyed. So that's a challenge that we as humans face, is overusing our habitat. Another one, which particularly struck me during the pandemic, is that snow geese are sick. They have a disease called avian cholera that kills as many as 30% every year. This is not a disease humans get, so I'm not trying to say you should be afraid of it. And in fact, it's not a cholera at all. And it is neither the same virus, nor does it have the same symptoms. So I have no idea why they call it cholera, but cholera they call it. And this cholera will kill as many as 30%. And sometimes a bird will drop right out of the sky dead from this cholera. Sometimes you will see there's some heartbreaking images of a nest with an egg in it and a dead parent right next to it. So it's just really challenging. Just another story about snow geese that I'd like to tell, and that is that there's a blue form. It really looks more gray to me. And so there's a larger form of snow geese on the East Coast you might have seen. Then there's sort of what they call the lesser, but they're still all one species. The lesser was in Texas, this white goose, and east of the Sabine River into Louisiana was a different form called a blue goose. And the two did not really mate together. And nobody knew where the blue geese nested. So there's a Canadian named Dewey Soper who he was a famous ornithologist for Canada, and he did field work. And I'll just read a little bit from my book. We all take on our own challenges for reasons known or unknown, even to ourselves, and these challenges enrich our lives. For a famous ornithologist, J. Dewey Soper, the personal challenge was to find the breeding grounds of the blue goose. Like many discoveries by Europeans and their descendants, discovering meant connecting with the right native people who knew all along where something was. And so it was with Soper. An Inuit named Salia drew a map from memory that pointed to Bowman Bay. By mid-May, Soper, 5 Inuit, and 42 dogs pulling sledges crossed Bowman Bay. On June 2nd, one flock of blue geese flew over, and by June 6th, thousands appeared. So Soper had figured out where the blue goose nested by asking the right people. So one of the reasons that snow geese have proliferated so much is the rice and grain farming on the Gulf Coast. And that also caused the divide from the white snow geese and the blue geese at the Sabine River to merge. And so then slowly blue geese and white geese started interbreeding, and Fred Cook was really interested in how that happened. So another thing about snow geese worth knowing is that they're matrilocal. That means that they breed where the female bred. So they pair up on the wintering grounds, and it doesn't happen in their first year. It can happen in their second or third year. They pair up on their wintering grounds, and then once they've paired up, she takes him to meet the family and goes to nest very close to where she came from. So Fred Cook was curious about whether or not they preferred or didn't prefer their own coloring. And it seemed like in general, whites mated with whites, but sometimes blues and whites mated together. So Fred Cook did a really kind of funny little study just to understand this up in La Perouse Bay using young geese. And he didn't do pink, he didn't do white and blue. He instead took a bunch of white geese and dyed some of them pink. Some of their family, if I remember right, dyed some of their families pink or white, and then the geese experienced either pink or white families. And then he put them in a choice arena to see who they would prefer being with. Now, this is, it's like a 5-minute speed dating versus mating for life. It's not exactly the same, but he found that those that the geese preferred to associate with those that shared the color of their families. And so in his case, he used pink, which of course was totally not natural, but that they did prefer their families. So that's part of what, at least at first, kept the blue and the white geese apart. But it went away. And when you see a blue goose and a white goose, you might think, oh wow, there's probably all kinds of other genetic differences between them. But it turns out that actually they're not, and that this was just a difference at one locus that had to do with the color, and so it wasn't like a huge kind of difference. So, you ready for another bird story? You handle another bird story. This one's a good one. It's a bird you have around in the winter. So here we go with the white-throated sparrows. Do you know these birds? We have them up here in northern Michigan. They do breed, but in St. Louis, they're gone by about March, late March or April. We do have them all winter. One of the first story I'll tell is just simply that their song, people say it as pure, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada. And I just love that song and I love hearing it. But it turns out that there were some birds on the West Coast that dropped the last syllable. So they were saying pure, sweet, canna, 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 instead of canna, 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 canna. Sorry. Pure, sweet, instead of Canada, 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 they were saying canna, canna, canna. And then it turned out that in the Adirondacks, the next year, this same song showed up. So clearly the birds had learned it on their wintering grounds and were picking up the new song. Okay, so you see in this picture, there's a white lore and a white line on the crown of the head. And in these birds, there's another form that has a tan lore and a tan line on the head. I should have had a picture of that. And Audubon actually thought that was the female, that the tan was the female and the white was the male, but he would not have been correct. It turns out there's this big chromosomal inversion of the one of the second largest chromosomes, and that causes the white form. So whites cannot mate. If whites mate with another white, they will not have fertile, they won't be able, they're young, the eggs won't hatch. So a white has to mate with a tan. There's another difference, and they think they know the gene for it in that area also. And that is that it's a gene related to testosterone, and the white males tend to be more aggressive, less faithful, and less good parents than the tan males. So, and that's all due to this gene in this inverted area. So the white males have to mate with tan females. The tan males could mate with either, but if they mate with a tan female, they're liable to be cuckolded by one of these white males. So the whites tend to mate with tan, and the tan with white. So what that effectively means is that these birds have 4 chromosomal sexes, not 2. It's a very unusual sort of thing. So there's also kind of a sad story about how this was all figured out. It was figured out, the chromosomal inversion, and the first part of the story was figured out by I forget his name, but a Canadian grad student, published it in Science, which is a top journal. And then he did much more work sort of detailing everything, put that in his dissertation, got his PhD, and then sadly died by suicide before he published it. And so what then happened was that his advisor asked another student if he would write up that work from the guy that died, and he did. And Bob Montgomery told me this story, and I just thought, wow, that's amazing. And I'm also a skeptic. So I looked at the paper and I just said, well, there's no sign of it. He's not mentioned in the acknowledgments. He's not an author. What gives? And Bob said, oh, you have to look more closely. And I could see there was this little tiny asterisk after the single author. And then at the bottom, it then gave the name of the guy who had written it all up. So I just thought, like, wow, that is such an act of altruism to write up somebody else's work and not even be an author. I mean, these days that he for sure would have been a co-author. Anyway, so I was able to call him up. He was a retired professor at this point, and talk to him about it. And he just must be such a nice guy. And he just said, well, he was happy to do it, that he was really impressed by the work, and it had influenced his own research, which ended up being on black flies, and that he was happy to do it. So I just thought that was really, really kind of sweet. I have to let the dog in. Oh, there he is. Okay. You want to say hi? You want to say hi? He doesn't want to say hi. He wants to play. So let's see. There's other birds in the book. I think I'll stop with the birds at this point. I can tell you I've got a book coming out at the end of October, and it's called the Slow Birding Journal. And it gives you space. It's got some prompts based on these birds, and also some kind of just meditative prompts. Pages look like this. You can't really see, but they might ask a question. Here it's just, what is that bird singing over and over? And then space for you to write bird, place, time, temperature, date, weather. And then you can't see this, but this is those dots. I love pages with those dots so you can write or draw. Anyway, I think Barnes & Noble has a pre-order sale of some percent off on that. I guess in the shameless promotion, I'm working on another book that will be out in about a little more than a year. It's about the social lives of birds. And I'll tell you that the title was going to be Avian Nation, the social lives of birds. And that has a certain appeal, but unfortunately, it sounds a little bit like something else that is not so attractive. So we've decided to ditch the Avian Nation, and we're struggling to find something else to use in its place. And I've got my family and my lab group. My daughter went to Wellesley, and she's posted a query for title ideas to her Wellesley friends, and I think maybe they've come up with one that I'll use. But anyway, if you have any ideas of a good gripping title for a book about the social lives of birds. I'd love to hear it. So that's what I have to tell you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful, Joan. Thank you so much.
Sure.
If you want to stop sharing your screen, maybe we can come back together and I can check out what questions have come in. Perfect. So we're going back to the robins. I've always heard that robins hopping about the yard cock their head side to side, evidence that they listen for movement underground in search of worms. Is that true?
Well, that's a really fun question to answer because my friend Bob Montgomery was really curious about that one too and quite skeptical. And with Pat Weatherhead, did a series of experiments to see if it was the sound or the smell or vibrations or what, and discovered that it is the sound. So they found that the only way they could mess up robins from finding the worms was by burying a speaker in the soil so they couldn't hear the vibrations. So yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Do the individual birds that I see daily in my backyard return to my backyard day after day, or do they constantly move to other locations?
I mean, most birds are territorial. So if you see a robin in your yard day after day, it's probably the same one. Now, if you've got feeders, you may have a lot. One thing that you could do with some birds, like cardinals and song sparrows, is they actually have distinguishable songs, which are really fun to tell apart. So if you listen carefully to your robin, till your cardinal or your song sparrow, you might be able to really tell. But that's so you can be sure who's who.
Sure. Does avian cholera spread to other bird species besides snow geese?
Yes, it does. It does. And it's a reason to keep your feeders clean and stuff. I don't know all the details about it, though.
Another snow goose question. When you mentioned that the females take their males back to, I forget the exact term you use, but to meet the family, what does that mean for the snow goose?
So the female goes back to where she's from, and so she will then find a place to nest close to where she was born and where presumably her relatives are. There isn't any kind of like social behavior with them, so I was probably taking a little bit of license saying meet the family.
Sure. I like the idea of it though. Where can we find more information about other birds not written about in your book? This person's particularly interested in catbirds. Where would you send people to do some research?
Well, the web. There's a Birds of the World has pieces on all of the different birds. It's by subscription, so it's something your library might have. Audubon, things like that. If you really want detailed stuff, you can go to Google Scholar and type in catbird, gray catbird, and see if you find some papers that you can look at. Yeah. And I do talk about catbirds in the next book.
Okay. Good to know. If you want to see catbirds in your local, come to Jenkins. We are catbird country. This person is asking, they are local to Philly. She wants to attract goldfinches. Is that anything that you can speak on?
Sure. Goldfinches are a prairie meadow bird. So if you're in a forested area, you're not going to get goldfinches. If you've got some open areas, lawns or whatever, I have great goldfinches in my yard in St. Louis and here. I just plant black-eyed Susans and sunflowers and things with seeds, and the goldfinches come to them, and they're really fun to watch. They have kind of a call as they're flying that people say it's like saying potato chip, potato chip.
Interesting. And I would echo that with the plants that produce a lot of great seeds, like different coneflowers, and just kind of make sure that when you're doing your fall cleanup, you don't do it. You leave seed heads up through the winter and allow the birds to come and eat the seeds out of certain perennials. So it's a good reason to not clean the garden to
I
attract
never clean the
birds.
garden.
Yeah, that's exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah.
Are chickadee populations similar to some things you were talking about with other birds relating to being different species, but kind of not? There's, I know there's things with chickadees, yeah.
So where you are is kind of on this borderline between the black-capped chickadee to the north and the Carolina chickadee to the south, which is moving more north. You may be right in that hybrid zone. And so those were two different species. They're hybridizing, but they're not, the hybrids do not do as well. And actually, one of the world leaders in research in that area is Bob Curry, he's just retired from Villanova. So, yeah.
I'm just reading this one real quick.
Yeah.
All right, here's a bird ID question. See if we can get your help. This is also in suburban Philadelphia. It says there's an all gray bird having black eyes, a swallow-like black tail that hovers around near the suet feeder. It likes to take a saucer bath. It doesn't chirp or sing, maybe what they notice. And they're wondering, what could it be? A mysterious bird.
Yeah. So if you go to Merlin will let you put in those characteristics.
Okay.
From size to color. I mean, all gray, if it had a black cat, I might be thinking of a cat bird. Yeah. If it had white edges to its tail, it could be a mockingbird. Birds don't necessarily sing at all times of the year, males or females. So, yeah. So that's a hard one.
Yeah. But that's a good tip about using Merlin, and I will put a lot of those resource links in the page that I create for our registrants. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome. So now we're going back to blue jays. Someone said that they've not been a big fan of blue jays because they seem to pick on the others. Can you talk more about that behavior?
Well, so I'm sitting here, it's still bright light out, and the blue jays will fly in and take over the feeders until the common grackles fly in and take over the feeders, and I don't know, animals are there's lots of hierarchies and things. One of the things about blue jays, though, is they're really good about alarming if they see a predator or something, and all the birds depend on the blue jay alarm calls, and they'll all fly over to harass an owl or a hawk or something. So, so yeah, that's part of what we see. I
Mhm.
don't know what to say. Bigger
Yeah.
birds pass smaller birds within species, between species. Yeah.
So actually going on that of bird harassment, and maybe going the other way of small birds with big birds. This question said, I saw 3 small birds attacking a crow. The crow got away and landed on the telephone wire where there were 5 other crows. What was going on there?
Well, so crows and blue jays and other birds will go for young or for eggs or something like that in the nest, and the smaller birds will attack them. And, I've seen smaller birds attacking hawks and everything. So it was chasing away a a crow that was coming after probably its young. And yeah, then the crow flies off and then they leave it alone because it's not a threat anymore. But yeah, it is kind of amazing to see a small bird defending its young from a much larger predator.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the blue jays and the crows and birds like that. House wrens, which are one of our smallest little birds, the females will go into another female's nest and pierce their eggs and cause them to fail. So yeah.
So much happening out there. There's 2 other Blue Jay notes here. One is, do Blue Jays offspring return to the same area they were raised in?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
No problem. And this one is about a blue jay that they had some peanuts out for, and they buried it under leaf litter in the flower beds. Is that a normal blue jay behavior?
Oh, I love that question because that lets me tell the blue jay caching stories.
Oh, nice.
Yes, so blue jays cache acorns mostly, and you may not have seen it recover it. It may wait for months before it goes back to get that acorn. And actually, one of the theories about how the forest moved north after the last glaciation, which was only 10,000 years ago, is that blue jays carried the acorns north and cached them. And there have been also lab studies of caching. So yes, they cache them. They remember not every single one necessarily, or they may not need all of them, but they totally remember where they are, and they don't necessarily pick them back up very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Your book and your talk has prompted many thoughts about bird behaviors. This one is about bathing. Is there any particular reason that robins might enjoy their baths? This person has noticed that robins really enjoy taking baths compared to other birds.
Um, I've just seen lots of different kinds of birds taking baths. So maybe your bath is in a good area for robins or something, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of nature centers have something they call a drip, where it is literally a drip, not a big fountain, but just a drip and then a little puddle. And it's just a great place to watch birds, and you can see lots of kinds of birds bathing. Yeah. They also take dust baths, which might be to help get the mites down or something.
Sure. This is a question about bird congregation. It says, why do birds congregate each evening in such large numbers? For example, I've seen gatherings of sparrows with lots of chirping in leafy shrubs.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Of birds generally flock to avoid flocks like that. They are avoiding predators, so they are kind of going to one place that is safer, trying to get in the middle. There's a great paper called Geometry for the Selfish Herd. If you can put someone else between you and the edge, you will be safer. Now, there's some birds like bush tits, for example, that'll literally sit next to each other and preserve warmth in the winter.
This is a question, talks about suet feeders again, but it says, is it unusual for robins or cardinals to go to suet feeders?
So cardinals go to suet feeders all the time. Cardinals have those big beaks. They're seed eaters. They'll really hurt you if you ban them. They'll go to sunflower seeds and to suet feeders. I have only seen robins. Robins generally eat fruit and worms. They don't eat seeds. Suet, though, is kind of like a worm, I suppose. I have seen in St. Louis, when it was a really, really cold winter, I once saw a robin go to a suet feeder.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm reading one quick thing. Rows in my yard have occupied all the bird houses that used to be occupied by wrens and bluebirds. Can you speak to this behavior?
Yeah, that's a little frustrating, I know. And house sparrows are slightly larger than wrens. So, and I don't remember the exact measures, but it's easy to find them. So what I did is I got this washer that had a hole, a metal washer that had a hole the right size for a wren that was too small for a house sparrow to get in. And I just screwed that on the entrance of the bird box so that I could get the house sparrows. I could get the wrens and not the house sparrows.
That's smart. Yeah.
You can also, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable doing this, but it's legal to simply dump the house sparrow stuff from the nest.
Okay.
With most birds, native birds are protected by the Migratory Birds Treaty Act, and so you can't mess with them. You can't even take cowbird eggs out of a nest. House sparrows and starlings are not so protected.
Okay.
Yeah.
This question is, why do all the birds seem to sing the first thing in the morning, especially in spring?
So that's called the dawn chorus, and there's tons of papers speculating why there is the dawn chorus and what's going on. And there's lots of different ideas on it. One of them is that it is a time when the birds can establish their territories. It's too early to really forage effectively. I'm sorry. The dog rules this house. And when he wants in, he gets in. And when he wants out, he has to get out. Anyways, another idea about the dawn chorus that's been shown in some birds is that the males are singing at that time and the females are listening and thinking about their liaisons outside their pair bond and who they're gonna mate with. And females generally choose, if they're gonna cuckold the male that they're with, they'll choose a male that has a more complex song, with often older. I love the dawn chorus. Yeah.
For sure. All right. There is one more question, and not to leave on a negative note of discouraging birds from nesting, but this person's asking how that they might discourage a wren from nesting in their gazebo. It seems like they've tried to put up some screening in the eaves and the bird keeps finding ways in. Is there any ideas for bird nesting in general?
I would just feel so fortunate to have it, but I get it if it's screaming at you. Yeah, it's not in there all that long. Um, Maybe block it off more. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll end on this note. This person saw a male cardinal, but it had a black head. Do you know what might have caused that?
Well, so male cardinals do have some black on their heads. You're probably meaning an all black head. And probably what was going on was that it was molting. And so it had lost all its feathers on its head and looked quite black. Yeah, the this is about the time when you're starting to see molting. It's kind of a interesting conundrum for birds because they completely change out their feathers before they migrate south, and it's energetically hard. They kind of have to hide because their feathers don't, I mean, they don't lose the ability to fly. They do them a few at a time. So they have to be done with nesting and caring for their young, but before they start flying south. So there's just this little window we're coming up on it. So you'll see some pretty scraggy looking birds.
Sure. That's good to know. Well,
Yeah.
Joan, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We've enjoyed having your book featured for our Arboretum partnership this year, and we're so thankful that we could have you with us as a part of our programming. So thank you again. And for those of you still with us, I will be adding a bunch of the resources that Joan discussed to our page, and I will send everything out with the recording next week when it is ready. So Joan, thank you again. Good luck with the new book coming out, and maybe we'll have to have you back to talk about that one.
You'll be delighted to.
All right. Enjoy your time in Michigan, and
Thank
hopefully
you.
we'll see everyone next month. All right.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.